Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to Fallout 3, where today we're going to be taking a look at another energy weapon. Today we're going to be taking a look at the plasma pistol and its unique variant. And the plasma pistol in Fallout 3 is actually quite solid, which is nice. These are kind of rare. You're probably not going to be finding them until the mid to late game, depending on how far you are into the story, because they're not really for sale by a lot of vendors, or that you can just find plasma pistols, which can be kind of a pain to actually get them in the early game. It's going to be a whole lot easier to get laser pistols than it will to be getting plasma pistols. However, once the Enclave starts showing up, then you can actually get them pretty readily, because pretty much every Enclave officer carries a plasma pistol as their secondary, or I guess as their primary. The Enclave soldiers won't, because they'll be carrying around laser and plasma rifles, but the officers absolutely will. So getting these may or may not be that difficult for you, depending on where you're going or what your plan is for the actual story. For the stats of the plasma pistol, this one does 25 damage per shot, which is pretty good. That's actually really good for a handgun. It's one of the highest amounts of damage out of any of them. This one has 75 damage per second. It is very good with the damage per second. This one does shoot quite fast, although the projectile does have movement speed, just like the plasma weapons do, at least from Fallout 3 onward. So you will need to potentially aim ahead of the enemy to actually hit them. This one has a 2x crit modifier, so it's twice as likely to hit crits as normally, which is good. Does 25 crit damage. This one costs 21 action points to use in VATS, which is quite good as well. This one has a spread of 0.5, so it's not that inaccurate, as well as the projectile is kind of large since it's one of the plasma balls, so spread may not matter too much, at least at close and medium range. At longer ranges, this isn't going to be as reliable, especially compared to certain weapons, like we talked about the laser rifle not too long ago. That one's a whole lot more accurate than this. This one holds 16 rounds, and unlike in Fallout New Vegas, the regular plasma pistol actually just consumes 1 ammo every time you shoot it. I actually didn't remember that until filming this, because I assumed that it always took 2 ammo. So this one's actually better than something like the one in New Vegas, potentially, at least in terms of ammo economy. This one weighs 3 weight, which isn't too heavy, and this one can shoot 400 shots before it breaks. That's not too bad, although if you do manage to get a plasma pistol early on, that can be a little bit disappointing if you can't be repairing this. It can be a little bit rough then, but overall, the plasma pistol is a pretty solid early game weapon or a mid game weapon, depending on when you get it, at least if you're going energy weapons. For the pros of this weapon, it does have really high damage per second. Its damage per shot is pretty good, and it makes for a pretty reliable pistol. This also has very common ammo. This uses the same ammo that the laser pistols use, so if you're not having trouble with that ammo, you shouldn't be having trouble with this ammo. A lot of robots tend to carry that around, and you can usually buy it from vendors, so that's nice. Major cons to this weapon is that it's rare. You're probably not going to get it in the early game, so finding one of these early on could be useful, assuming that it's in decent condition, but you're probably not going to be. It's just going to take you a little while, and the slow travel time can be a little bit difficult to manage, at least at longer ranges. That's really about the only 2 cons, and both those cons aren't that big of a deal once you have a steady supply of plasma pistols. So the plasma pistol is actually quite solid, and for an overall rating, I think I'd put this up into A tier. I see no reason not to. I personally think that this one is better than the regular laser pistol, maybe not compared to some of its unique variants, but I think that this one does get you more value per shot, and it's going to be more useful in the handgun role than a laser pistol. Not saying the laser pistol is bad or anything, I just think this one's a little bit better. There is one unique version of the plasma pistol in this as well, and that is called the Nova Surge, or the MPLX Nova Surge. The Nova Surge you get in the Mothership Zeta DLC. This one you find inside the cargo hold in that DLC. It's potentially easy to miss because this weapon is hidden inside of a safe, or at least it's kept inside of a safe, and you do need to have up to 75 science to actually get into the safe because it's tied to a terminal. So if you break that terminal, and assuming you don't have computer whiz, which you really shouldn't take, if you break that terminal, then you are locked out of this weapon, and I don't think you can get this if you leave the area. I could be wrong if you move further in the ship. This might be one of the few areas you can actually come back to. If so, then you might be able to get this if you have dog meat and have them search the chest. You can do this with the Victory Rifle, and that's why this might work for this, but otherwise, you're going to have to get into that locked safe. Once you get into the safe, though, you get the pistol, and this one is really strong. This one's really good as a secondary weapon, or even as a primary weapon. So for the stats of the Nova Surge, this one does 80 damage per shot, which is very high. That's one of the highest damage per shot out of any weapon in the game. That's rivaling even some of the big heavy hitting weapons. This one does 240 damage per second because it shoots very fast. It's just as fast shooting as the regular plasma pistol. This one has a whopping 3 times crit modifier on it, so it's way more likely to hit crits, which is really good. This one also does 75 crit damage. Weirdly enough, it has slightly less crit damage than it does regular damage, but its crit damage is still very high. This one also costs 21 action points using VATS. This one only has 0.5 spread, so same as the regular plasma pistol. This one does hold 16 rounds in it, but this does consume 2 ammo every time that you use it. So per shot, this one, I guess, would be doing like 40 damage a shot, but that's still quite high for a weapon like this. And even if you disregard that, it's still outcompeting all of the 44 Magnums because it's an 8-shot pistol that does more damage than them. So that's pretty good, besides Paulson's revolver. We'll talk about that when we get to the 44 guns, though. That one is overpowered for a different reason. This one does weigh double of a plasma pistol, so this one weighs 6 weight, and this one has a lot less item HP, being able to shoot it only 188 times before it breaks. This kind of makes sense since it does consume 2 ammo every time that you use it. This one is really strong. This is probably the strongest or second strongest weapon in the Mothership Zeta DLC. The only one that I think is stronger than this is probably Paulson's revolver, since that one is a shotgun weapon and those are just kind of overpowered in general. This one is a close second though, because this one I wouldn't say is overpowered, but it is very close to being overtuned. Like, it's very close to being in our broken tier. It's not that bad because you do need to at least have 75 science and do most of the DLC in order to get this. And the Mothership Zeta DLC can be one of the more difficult ones to actually do, as well as this one is potentially easy to miss and you may not be able to come back and get it. So I would put this one all the way up into S tier, but it could go into the broken tier. It is very, very strong. It's a really good weapon. I should also mention that since these are plasma weapons, and if you kill something with them, then they can turn to goo, which can make it easier to find that target since it's a bright green goo, so you might be able to see them easier if you just aren't seeing bodies on the ground. That is kind of a bonus, not that it really matters that much, and there isn't really any perks that help out with these either. But yeah, the unique one's really strong. The regular plasma pistol is also quite good. Tell me your thoughts on these weapons and how do you like them. Also tell me what other weapons you'd like to see covered in these videos. Thank you guys so very much for suggesting this one, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye bye everybody.